Good news and bad news. Good news is that was a beautiful introduction, beautiful Torah. The bad news is it was better than my speech. So, expectations, you know. Okay, so we're going to be speaking about Shalom Bayis. I'll translate Shalom Bayit. Right? Forgive my Ashkenaz pronunciation. I want to make this as practical as possible. So that means as we move along, whenever you have a question, comment, thought, concern, pops into your head, hit me with it. Fire away, interrupt if you want, doesn't make a difference. If you need a clarification, you need an example, something that doesn't make sense, if you need help for a friend of yours, we don't judge, whatever it is. Just fire away, hit me. We can make this as interactive as practical. I'm going to get through my material one way or another, so don't worry about it, okay? So again, at any point, at any time, you need clarification, you need an example, you want to know how to apply it, or you've got a better idea. Well, okay, we'll see how that goes. Fire away. Okay, fine. So with that Hakdama, we're going to be looking at what the research shows through the lens of Chazal are what successful couples do that unsuccessful couples don't do. These are the things that couples who are the happiest, most productive, do in their marriages that other couples don't. And we're going to see that just simply by applying some of these tools and strategies, you can take your marriage to a higher level. If it's here, go here, 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 and so on. It's not rocket science. I think it's fascinating. Of all the talks I give, I think these ideas are the most powerful because it doesn't just affect Shalom Bayis. I mean, you know, having a good marriage is great, but it affects your own emotional health. If you're blessed with children, anyone will tell you that the path to raising happy, healthy, and emotionally resilient children starts with Shalom Bayis. I mean, everything comes from here. So if you get this rock solid, life is just that much easier. Okay, fine. So, look, we don't come into marriage with an innate understanding always of exactly what it is that our spouse needs. I will freely confess, when I first got married, I didn't know that the stuff that my wife piled up at the bottom of the stairs was meant for me to bring up the stairs. Somehow, like, you guys just do that. You do that, don't you, Rebbitzin? How is he supposed to know? I mean, you know? It's not rocket science. Well, anyway, I was like pole vaulting over this stuff when I first got married until somebody cued me in. It wasn't in my chassan shmooze, that's all I could tell you. Okay, so fine. Anyone speaking about marriage will tell you that communication obviously is key, but like a lot of things, there are a right way and wrong way to communicate something to your spouse, particularly something that's on your mind. This guy recently tells me, he goes, you know what, he says to me, his wife was complaining that social media was interfering with their communication. I said, so what'd you do? He said, I blocked her. So I wanted to help him, so obviously I asked, what kind of insurance do you have? No. Okay, your spouse is not the amazing Kreskin. Your spouse is not a mind reader. If something's on your mind, you have to communicate it. Again, how you do it makes all the difference in the world. Here is the protocol to follow. Here's what happens, is that something's on your mind, your spouse does something, and you're boiling, you're waiting for him to walk in the door, or you're waiting to come home, and then boom, you pounce. We all know how unproductive those conversations are. When neither of you are in that space where you can have a productive conversation, don't have it. That means if you're hungry, tired, cranky, it's not going to work. I mean, you just know how those conversations go. It's not, again, rocket science. You have to wait and pick your time. The timing is so important. And granted, it might not always be easy to find a time where neither of you are hungry, tired, or cranky. Maybe it'd be like Halley's Comet every 72 years, I don't know. But, pick your time when you're in that space where you can have a productive conversation. And here's just a simple way to have it. First off is people think that the only way my spouse is going to understand just how upset I am is if I scream my point, or I yell my point, or I just show them how exacerbated I am. It doesn't work that way. When someone yells at you, your brain shuts down. Chazal talk about this, and the research shows. Literally, speak softly. Not in like a psychopathic soft way, like, I'm going to talk to you. That's freaky, that scares me. I'm talking about just a calm voice. It makes a very big difference. Use what we call I statements. The Rav spoke about taking the ego out of the way. When you put the blame on your spouse, they can't help but get defensive. And it is so, once you illuminate it, you're going to see. Once you understand just the mechanics of it, it's going to make so much sense. By using I statements, meaning you make it about you, insofar as I'm having a hard time when blah, blah, blah. This is something I'm having difficulty with. Because look at it this way. If your spouse is in pain, and they come to you, the only reason you don't take them out of pain is if they put you in pain, and you get defensive. I mean, if your spouse comes to you with a fork in their eye, you're going to want to take it out. Actually, not supposed to do that, but you get the metaphor. The only reason you might not be eager to do that if they say, look what you did. You'd be like, hey, hold on a second. I didn't put the fork, yeah? So if you go to your spouse and you put them on the defensive, they're going to get defensive. If you don't accuse them of doing anything wrong, they're going to take you out of pain naturally. The math makes perfect sense. So whatever the situation is, if you say, you know what, I appreciate you did this, 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 and this. I'm having a hard time with blah, blah, blah. Me, my stuff. Call it childhood issues, call it trauma, call it my mishigas, whatever it is. This is something, because in the scheme of things, 99.99% of the things that really bother us are narishkeit, the silliness. Not always, sometimes. But whatever that is, whatever is on our mind, if we're able to just bring it up in a way that doesn't put our spouse on the defensive. Because again, if you're in pain and you go to them saying, I'm having a hard time with this, they would instantly take you out of pain. See, we think that we get upset because our spouse does something. That's not what happens. If anyone here thinks that we get upset because our spouse does something that we don't like, you're wrong. You think you do, but you don't, because here's what happens. Let's say your spouse does something that you don't like, and you go to them. You say, hey, Eishes Chayil, whatever. This is what happened, and I'm having a hard time with it. And then with tears in their eyes, they said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry I did X, Y, Z. I don't know what I was thinking. And they go on, authentically and honestly, with tears in their eyes. In 2 seconds, you'd be trying to put them out of pain. It's okay, it's not the end of the world, don't worry about it, and so on. See, what bothers us is not what our spouse does. What bothers us is the meaning we attach to it, and that meaning is always the same. They don't love me, they don't respect me, they don't care about me, etc., etc., etc. It's all about our feelings of insecurity. Because if you theoretically had perfect 100% self-esteem, like me, your sole and singular thought would be, how much pain must my spouse be in? In other words, you would be completely empathetic. The only reason you can't empathize is empathy, as the Rav said, is your pain is my pain. But I can't focus on your pain if I'm stuck with my own. So if you put me into pain, I'm not going to take you out of pain. So again, you go to your spouse, you just make it, use I statements. I'm having a time with X, Y, Z. If you don't put them on the defense, they're not going to get defensive. Yes, please.
Sorry.
No, to interrupt. Great.
No, I think 100% of the people here agree with everything you're saying, and I'm sure everybody...
Hit me with the butt, come on!
I have to build up to it because it's very important. So everybody agrees, I'm sure many people dabbled with it, especially with so many events that Emmett does, that thought about it.
Sure.
So conceptually, perspective-wise, I agree with you 100%, but when it's in the moment, these things don't run through our mind. It doesn't run through my mind. So it's very hard to at least activate or make it practical. So how do we make it practical, all these obvious, so to speak, right? Because the math works, as you said.
Sure.
I also agree.
Excellent.
We'll make this practical.
Excellent.
Especially at the moment.
Beautiful.
It doesn't not make sense because you're out of the circle. When you're in the circle, it's another world.
Good. Daniel, is it?
Yes.
Daniel. So what Daniel's saying is a very good point. Daniel's saying, hey, look, very good. You're giving us almost obvious eitzah, but in the moment it doesn't work. Because what happens in the moment? In the moment we lose one thing. The thing we lose is called perspective. What blocks perspective is the ego. Go all the way back to the beginning. Adam Arishon, the first man, could see from one end of the earth to the other. Before the Yetzer Hara, the serpent incarnate, became internalized, man's perception was unfettered. Once that ego, the I, enters, we begin to see through the cloudy lens of I. It's the ego that blocks perspective. It keeps us from seeing clearly. In the moment, if your ego is engaged, you're only going to be focused on your own pain. You're exactly right, which is why successful couples know to have a mechanism in place in how to deal when they can't deal. Meaning, that you're not always going to be in the right emotional space to have the conversation. So here's the exact protocol. Like Chazal put a fence around halacha, you want to put a fence around yourself when you don't have the emotional bandwidth to give, when you're not in the right space. So it works like this. Typically, when you're upset about something and your spouse is upset about something, you know how unproductive those conversations are. So what happens is one person grows up in a house where they learn to deal with conflict by fighting it out. The other person grows up in a house where everyone sort of goes to their own corner, they go to their own room, they breathe, they take a couple of hours, and then they reconnect. Then Hashem puts both of those people together. Yeah? So the problem is not so much in having a mechanism in order to disengage so the conversation doesn't spiral, it's how to deal with that. So here's the protocol. I'm sorry?
It's to have the same mechanism, right?
It's exactly right. It's the same mechanism, and you're going to follow as such. If you don't have the space, the emotional space, to be able to have the conversation, you can't simply just disengage because our greatest pleasure is connection. That makes our greatest fear the pain of disconnection. So when you move away from your spouse and you say, I'm not talking about this, and you walk out, depending on their emotional health, the conversation, what's going on, they're going to feel bad, to put it lightly. It's going to double down on their emotional strain. What you want to do is briefly connect and then disconnect, meaning you'd say something such as, I can see this is very important to you. I just don't have this headspace to talk about this right now. Would it be okay if we revisited after dinner or such and such? That's it. All right. Or it could be, I love you. I know this is important to you. I just need a few minutes to just sort of collect myself. That's all you need to do. You need to have a mechanism where you can just connect before you separate. That's it. And then when you're in the right space, you can have that conversation productively. No doubt, I will share with you that once you get into the habit of using I statements, bringing it up gently, and I'm going to show you the protocol for the other spouse. It's one thing for it to be lopsided, but since you're both here, I'm going to share with you the other side, which will make it a lot easier, meaning that if you're sharing something that's important to you, something you're upset about, yeah, I'm going to show you what the response should be, ideally, from your spouse that will allow for you to continue to want to share and to connect. Okay, but at the end of the day is, if you can't have a productive conversation, you don't think you can have a productive conversation, don't begin it. But the disconnection is important. Okay. Excellent point. So what's the job of the other spouse? Is that clear, by the way? Yeah? In other words, if you don't have the space, by the way, and there's a great thing I used with one client years ago. Ever since then, I continue to use it with everyone anytime this came up. I call it the yellow scarf, because this happened to be, I would wear a yellow scarf. Whenever she was in a space where she just wasn't able to give her husband, the time, attention, whatever, she would put on a yellow scarf, and that was the signal, just don't ask about your day, just give me a little space. But ahead of time, she sat down and said, here's what this scarf means. When she was in a positive space, it means, I love you, I care about you, I respect you, blah, blah, blah. am just, when I'm wearing this, in a space having nothing to do with you, that I just am not going to have a productive conversation. That was it. Everything changed. Doesn't have to be a yellow scarf. Maybe Liberace would like it, whatever. Can't make Liberace references. Wow. I live in Lakewood, so I don't get them much, but okay. So what's the job of the other spouse? Yeah? Job of the other spouse is twofold. That is empathy and validation. See, again, our greatest pleasure is connection. That makes our greatest pain the fear of disconnection. When your spouse comes to you and says, I'm concerned about XYZ, I'm having a hard time with ABC, whatever it is, here is your job. Empathy, validation, go weiter. That's it. Empathy. What's empathy? Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is your pain is my pain. Sympathy is stinks to be you. Empathy means that whatever it is you're feeling, like the bird, I'm going to feel that as well. So the number one rule in dealing with an upset spouse is the same in customer service. You never interrupt. So how do you convey empathy to your spouse if you're not interrupting? What are you doing?
Facial expression.
Right. You're all saying the exact right things, and that is that through nonverbal communication, you're going to have whatever emotion your spouse is expressing etched on your face. Now, we know people who stink at empathy. Some call them men, but okay. Empathy, by the way, is not, you ever talk to somebody about, something, that's on your mind? It's like, yeah, I'm having a really hard time with, let me tell you something. And in 2 seconds you're talking about something they went through, their issue, and it's just like, wow, how'd that happen? Span it around so fast. When your spouse comes to you with their pain, or even something small, your child comes, I'm so tired, oh, I'm exhausted too, I didn't sleep well. What are you doing? Small thing, big thing. We just run so fast past the other person's pain without even thinking about it. We consistently do it. When your spouse comes to you, again, big or small, and a lot of these things, by the way, are applicable, same with chinuch, with our kids. But when your spouse comes to you with something that is painful, you want to make sure you're not interrupting, and whatever he's experiencing is etched on your face. Their pain is your pain. That's it. By the way, what are you doing with your hands when your spouse is talking to you? Boo-doo-doo-doo. Here's what you don't do. Yes, excellent. The kiss of death, and this is studied in negotiations, mediation, in sales, communication. The worst body language you can exhibit is this. Anyone listening on Tarni time, it is crossed arms. I know everyone with your arms crossed now don't know what to do because you're like, wow, Lieberman said, don't go. You can cross them here. But sometimes our arms are comfortable crossed. It could be cold. We're just resting our arms. The challenge, of course, is you're speaking to your spouse and they instantly do this. How do you feel? Right? Defensive, closed off, resentful, whatever it is, it's just that awful body posture. There are other ones that aren't ideal, but you don't want to cross your arms. You want to be completely engaged, focused. That means you're giving them your full time and attention. Listening is something that comes easier to some people than others. I was on a train some time ago, and I see this Asian couple sitting across from me. She was going on a mile a minute. He was holding up the newspaper. Newspaper never went down. Every minute or so, he'd go, "Aye, aye." I'm watching this for like 45 minutes. Aye, but she's got. That's not a conversation. Conversation is eye contact and full engagement. It makes a very, very, very big difference. What's that?
Maybe that was the ideal conversation in their culture. You never know.
Could be.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, maybe it worked for them. I wouldn't have rolled the dice with my wife, but you're welcome to. I'm going to go home. You try that. Would you like for him to go, aye? That's a no, by the way. Yeah. Empathy. Validation is an extension of empathy. Here's where people drop the ball a lot. Validation has nothing to do with the facts, nothing to do with right and wrong, nothing to do with... Validation simply says, I acknowledge that this is painful for you. Based on your perspective, based on your experience, I can see why this is so hard. You're having a conversation with your spouse, and they say these words, I can see why this is so difficult. Instantly, your shoulders drop and you become relaxed. Your entire posture changes. See, here's what happens. Your spouse comes to you in pain. We do the exact opposite often of empathize and validate. We end up minimizing. It's not such a big deal. We justify it. I only did that because you did this. Worse, we blame them. If you would have listened to me in the first place, blah, blah. We absolutely cut the cord of connection. We disconnect. It is so powerful whenever your spouse goes to you, simply just listen. Full time and attention, empathy. Next validation. I can see why this is so difficult for you. That's it. You're not agreeing. You're not telling them they're right or they're wrong. Nothing to do with the facts. I want to share something with you. There's an organization called From Divorce. Self-described what they do. It's for divorced from people, and they have a Shabbaton twice a year. I have the chus to speak there, and I ask the same question every time, and I get the same response every time. The question I ask them is as follows. How many of you would still be married today? Talking about 300-400 men and women. If your spouse just did this one thing, I'll share with you what that one thing is, but just this one thing. But remember, nothing else in the marriage changed. He was still crazy, she was still nuts. Whatever the issues were in your marriage that caused you to get divorced, they were still there, but your spouse just did this one thing. How many of you would still be married today? 75% of the hands shoot up. What's the one thing? When you went to your spouse with something that was on your mind, something that was bothering you, something that you wanted to speak about. If they empathized and validated, but get this, still didn't do what you wanted. We think we argue over our right to get what we want. We don't. We argue over right to be heard, to be respected, to be validated. That is all we want. If your spouse feels insignificant, they're going to get upset and you're going to have a challenge. It is, and when they come to you, when you go to your spouse, if you are just cognizant not to put them on the defense, you'll have a much, much more productive conversation. That is a big piece of it. Okay, any questions, comments, thoughts? Anything not clear? Yes, fire away.
So, like you just said, like you express your feelings to them and they say they understand it, but then they don't do what you want them to do or what you ask them to do, and they just go back into the same habit again. How do you deal with that without going off the rails?
Excellent. Without going off the rails. Wow. Okay. So, all right. So the very good question is, okay, fine. Let's assume you've done all these things, and your spouse still isn't listening to you. So first, my contention is this: is that while we want what we want, in the terms of the situation, would you agree that it is valuable to be heard out, meaning that your spouse doesn't dismiss you or what you want. They empathize with it, they validate it, they understood, respect it, end of the day still sees it differently. Would you feel differently about the situation than if he simply said out of hand, you're being crazy again, stop with that? Would you prefer the first way?
Yes, but I probably still feel the same way.
You'd still feel the same way. Okay, so
I wouldn't feel like I was heard. I didn't feel like I was...
well, I'm sorry, so if I understand you correctly, if your spouse doesn't do what you want, you're going to say that you don't feel heard?
Right.
Is there
a specific habit, for example.
Okay. But first off, is there any way that you and your spouse could see? Look, there are plenty of times in my marriage, I want to do things one way, my wife wants to do them the right way, and we get into a disagreement. But is there any way that you could want to do something one way, your spouse see it differently, and he's not bad or wrong for feeling that way?
Yes.
Okay.
And it could still be a hard ask, like what you're asking can
Right.
still be hard,
Right.
but the fact that he or she
No,
wants to.
yes, thank you. Let me just, I like that. Is that, in other words, what you're asking for, I'll explain to you exactly how to handle that, by the way. But I would just politely encourage you to recognize that the fact that your spouse hears you and acknowledges how difficult this is for you. He's got a habit of leaving the toothpaste off the, toothpaste, what's it called? No, off the tube. Yeah, leaving the toothpaste thing off the toothpaste, leaving out the mayonnaise, gambling away the money in Atlantic City, whatever the small thing is. He's got a little nasty habit. Now, there's a difference between saying, by invalidating, you're making a big deal, stop doing this, I do all this other stuff, blah, 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 versus, you know what, you're right. This is something that I'm working on. I hear why it's so annoying. Here's the steps I'm going to do, but end of the day is I've got my childhood is blah, blah, blah. Would you agree that you might feel differently if he was able to separate out the behavior from the fact that it's not because he doesn't care about you, love you, respect you, it's simply because he's not able to? It's not a matter of motivation, it's a matter of capability. And this comes into play a lot with kids, but we forget to bring it into the zone with our spouse. Just because they are, reasonably emotionally healthy and intelligent, it doesn't mean they can automatically do things that we would think would be easy for them. Do you agree with that or no? Yeah. Okay, so here's how you handle it. Whatever it is your spouse is doing that you want to correct, the biggest mistake we make is we try to correct our spouse. If your spouse is the kind of person who you say, hey, stop doing that, and they go, you get it, then fine, no problem. Here's what to do if you're not married to that person. Nobody moves forward from negativity. No one moves forward from guilt. No one moves forward from being being beat up. People move forward from love, validation, and respect. Here's what happens. When you criticize your spouse and you bring something up when they're doing what you don't want them to do, 3 negative things happen. 1 is they're upset with you. 2 is they're upset with themselves. The 3rd, most damaging, they're justifying in their heads all the reasons to why it makes sense to do what they do. See, when you put someone on the defense and you go on the attack, they now have to defend themselves, which means you're actually causing your spouse to justify all the things that they've been doing. Rather, When your spouse does or doesn't do what you want them to do, meaning if it's a habit and they're not doing it and they're cognizant of it, that's when you'd go ahead and you would give the same speech pretty much, but it's all positive, meaning rather than beat them up when they get it wrong, you acknowledge when they get it right. For example, Chaim, whatever it is, I just want to acknowledge, I can see that you didn't do X, Y, Z. I know how hard it is for you. I really appreciate that even if you don't, get it right tomorrow, the fact that you did it this time, I just want you to know it's something that I saw and I really appreciate. 3 positive things happen. Number 1 is he's loving you. Number 2 is he's loving himself. Number 3 is most powerful. You're giving him a self-concept to live up to. This is the kind of person who does X, Y, Z. Self-concept is very important. How people see us shapes our own behavior. Let me just give you a quick example. Erev Shabbos, knock at your door. 10 minutes before Shabbos, person's at your door, they want to ask a question about the Eruv, whatever it is. For whatever reason, your house is calm. Kids are at the park, cleaning lady was there, your shirt's tucked in, whatever it is. You open the door, and the person just, wow, I had a question about the Eruv, but my goodness, you are just so calm and composed. It's 10 minutes before Shkia, and wow, that's tremendous. Fast forward the next week, 10 minutes before Shabbos, different scene. In the house, this one's biting that one's in the microwave, there's a fire going on, house looks like a tornado went through it, you haven't been in the shower yet, nothing's going. You go through the peephole, you see the person. Do you think you're going to have an easy time screaming at everyone, open the door and say, what do you want? You're going to tuck yourself in, you can open the door and you say, hi, sweetheart, out of the microwave. Yeah? You're going to be as calm and composed as you can. Because we have a drive, human nature, to be congruent with our self-concept, which is in part how other people see us. So let me share with you a true story. I'm speaking for an organization on Shabbaton called Kirav Tuni. Pretty much 1,000 Hasidim and me. That's what it is every time, right? Rachman knows those guys know how to party. It goes late. Anyway, I'm speaking. Maybe it was on Shalom Bayis, I don't remember. But this guy comes over to me afterwards. I gave over a similar idea. And he says, I want to share a story with you. He tells me the following story. He says, I've been married for 25 years. For the first 15 years of my marriage, he said, my wife never made the beds. No matter what, she would just never make the beds. For 15 years, I gave her a hard time. I said, how come this and that? Never make them. And then he said, I forgot whether he told me the reason I forgot it or he didn't tell me what the reason was. But whatever it was, she made the beds this one time. And he said, here's what I did. I sat her down. I say we call her Shandy, but that was her name, so we can't call her Shandy. But it's okay. So he goes, I sat her down, and I said, I didn't do one of these things. I didn't go, whoa, look, go finally made. None of that. He goes, I sat her down, and I said, look, I know I've been giving you a hard time about this. For whatever reason, I wanted to tell him, if making the beds is so important, why don't you do this yourself? I think this is the right motion, right? Just take the cover part, and I think it's it, yeah. So apparently he couldn't do it, and apparently I can't either. But so he goes, I know I've been giving you a hard time about this. I just want you to know, if you never make the beds again, it's okay. You're a wonderful wife, a wonderful mother. I appreciate this, and this. He goes, I went on legitimately for 5 minutes and just said, I just want to acknowledge, I really appreciate that you made the beds. He said, for the past now 10 years, she has never not once made the beds. It is so, think for yourself how powerful this is. Take the typical, stereotypical example of taking out the garbage, which apparently is a time-bound commandment, so women can't, but are you more inclined to take it out if your wife beats you up every time and you guys say, no, I'm going to go daven mincha, my hands and that, or you do take it out, one of those, on that rare occasion, she says, by the way, I know you were running out to shul or to work or to learn. I just want you to know, thank you so much. It was a lifesaver. I really appreciate it. You'd be like, oh, okay, I can do that again. Yeah, it is so powerful. Kids, spouse, everybody. Everyone moves forward from positivity. Okay. Any questions? Lots more to cover, but I'm sorry, Rebbetzin, did I answer your question okay in terms of how you deal with that? In other words, you're right. End of the day is we do want what we want. I mean, that's why it's called a want. But going to your spouse and being heard, legitimately heard, is very powerful in terms of recognizing now if they have to say N-O, it's not because they didn't K-N-O-W, they didn't know enough, they didn't care enough, they didn't respect us. That if you tease those two apart and your spouse is able to communicate to you, I love you, I respect you, I hear what you're saying, and listen and hear you out. I just see it differently. And then maybe you can have a conversation. You can come up with a compromise, convince one another, maybe speak to somebody else. But the relationship isn't injured because you don't accomplish what you want. But I can say, regarding your question in terms of a habit or wanting your spouse to move forward in a certain area, the way to optimize the chances of them moving forward is to catch them when they're doing it right and not to beat them up when they're getting it wrong. Okay? Beautiful. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Can you share a few examples of, showing empathy?
That's a stupid question. That's how not to do it. Question is a few examples of showing empathy. Yes, empathy again is your pain is my pain. Or for that matter, your pleasure is my pleasure. Meaning whatever the person is experiencing, you two are experiencing. Now, if you take your ego out of the way, I'm going to show you, take your ego out of the way, then it would be natural. Now you're a human being, you've got your own stuff. But whatever degree you can express non-verbally your spouse's emotional state, that is empathy. It's not with words. If it's on the phone or even in person, it could be active nodding, listening, and so on. It could, if you're not going to be. You ever this guy, the guy in shul, nice guy, but you can go to him and say, someone go, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling too good. Maybe I've got some chest pains. Oh, what? Check that out. It's like so incongruent. Whatever is your wife is experiencing and expressing, that's what you want to emote to. So it's done with a lot of nonverbals. It's done with nodding. I'll tell you a very powerful thing. Certainly nodding along like this. Now here's what's fascinating, is that when someone is speaking to you and you're nodding like this, it's very powerful, makes a difference. But here's a great technique. It's used a lot in interrogations, by the way. So whether you're talking to a serial killer or your spouse, comes in handy. And that is that when your spouse pauses, they take a breath, assuming they do, is rather than simply jump in, you give 3 quick nods. So they're talking like this, and then that is the subconscious permission to keep going. What happens is this: when somebody's speaking and they're expressing how they're feeling, they've got that narration going on. Is he really listening? Does he care? Blah, 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 blah. You got that whole other story going here. And then as soon as there's a pause, if they jump in right away, that will too often validate the fact that they're not fully engaged. So when you just go like this, that is the tacit permission to continue to talk. They won't always, but if they need to, they will. And the more your spouse talks, the better it is for you. The more you jump in and interrupt, the more you give them ammunition just to come back stronger. So empathy is expressed largely non-verbally, and it's mimicking or matching your spouse's state. It's also done in like a sort of advanced ways in terms of breathing, in terms of posture, in terms of body movements, all those types of things. You'll see people who are very sophisticated in sales do a lot of these things, because when you're able to match the energy and the emotional state of the buyer, very, very powerful, because then what you do, it's called matching and mirroring. You sort of mirror it, and then you develop this rapport that makes them feel so much more connected and close to you. So it can be used certainly manipulatively, but with our spouse, better. Okay, any other questions, Stutz? Okay, so moving along, and the hours. All right. Okay, let's just go to this. Next, here's what successful couples do that unsuccessful couples don't do. Successful couples know to not bring up the past, ladies and gentlemen. You're having a conversation with your spouse and you're losing. So you pull out from your pocket 1987. Well, do you remember when you, and it's like, huh? Don't do it. Successful couples know to stay in the present. When you bring up the past into the present conversation, because you got to go in the spin controller, you're losing the conversation, not only does it not benefit the current conversation, but I want to share with you what happens neurologically or physiologically, and that is every time you bring something up with negative emotion, you reanimate those neurons, those brain cells, and the connection between them called dendrites, and the connection sort of comes back to life. And you end up sort of re-experiencing it, and it now becomes more, it takes up more emotional space in your brain. It becomes more powerful. So it's not just about not bringing it to the conversation. When you rehearse it and you rehash it, it ends up bringing it back to life. And when you continue to do that, it ends up living in the present, which is obviously not productive. So successful couples know to keep the current conversations in the present. The question always comes up is, well, you know what if he's still doing X, Y, Z, and it happened some time ago? Then it's not a past conversation, it's a current one. But he's done tshuva, you've accepted it, go forward. You can't just bring it in because it's like a dead weight in the current conversations and they're just not productive. Okay. Next.
So if it repeats itself, it's a dead conversation?
No, I'm sorry. Let me do a better job explaining that. If it repeats itself, then it's not something in the past. It's something current. I'm talking about something that's already been dead, done, discussed, and now it gets dragged, resolved to whatever degree it can be resolved. And now you're dragging it into the current conversation only because you're losing this one. Right? That's not fair. It's not productive. Yeah? It doesn't belong in that space. If you still want to bring it up, go ahead, do it with the protocol we suggested in the beginning. When you're both in a calm space, bring it up, non-accusatorily, speak softly, and so on. You can have a very productive conversation. But when you drag into the present conversation, it's boom. Okay.
So how do you deal with it if it is still a current conversation?
Excellent. Very good. If it's still a current conversation, then once again, as we spoke about in the beginning. And by the way, anyone that, Torah Anytime I know is videoing this, but I have about 200 talks, I'm sure you're familiar with Torah Anytime, but 200 talks on relationships, mental health, Torah, and all those types of things, where you'll find maybe a couple dozen talks on Shalom Bayis and more. So I encourage you for maybe more detailed on some of these things to take a look there. But if it's something that's still happening, then once again, whatever is on your mind, what happens is if it's building resentment, that's frozen anger that's not productive because it ends up coloring how you're seeing your spouse, every interaction. By all means, if it's not something you've been able to deal with, bring it up. However, how you do it makes all the difference. Wait till you're both in a calm, quiet space. Neither of you are hungry, tired, cranky, and so on. You start with positivity. Let them know this is just something you're having a hard time with. Speak softly. Your spouse will empathize with it. They'll validate your experience, and you have a productive conversation. It works great. The challenge is not that you're bringing it up. The challenge is how we do it. Okay? So, which brings us to the next point. Could your spouse have done something smarter, easier, faster, better the way you would have done it? Sure. You don't have to be so critical. This is also true in chinuch, but doubly so in Shalom Bayis. The rule is ignore what you can ignore. Just because your spouse did something that doesn't make optimum sense to you, you don't have to mention it. First off, I would share with you that they're going to go easier on you, knowing you could have called them out on something and chose not to. They know that. And by the way, just general rule of one-offs, ignore them. If it's not something your spouse typically does, but they just, for whatever reason, were in a space, in a place where they did something that was just really not them, ignore it. What are you bringing it up for? They already feel the shame of doing it because it's not them. They already feel embarrassed by it. They may feel guilty about it. Whatever emotion, jumping on that is not going to help. Rather, completely ignoring it like it didn't happen will be met with such appreciation and gratitude. If it's a one-off, ignore it. Okay? When your spouse does something that doesn't meet your standard, you don't have to call them out on it all the time. You will find that the entire atmosphere in the house is just shifted when you focus on the positive. If you think about do you know, by the way, when it comes to chinuch, I'm not sure what the stats are with spouses, but with children, what the average praise to criticism ratio is, how often a child hears praise to criticism? You know what it is?
1 to 81.
Yeah, not bad. It's 1 to 40. Yeah? That means for every 1 bit of praise, a child is hearing 40 bits of criticism. which is, unless you work at the Department of Motor Vehicles, those are not very good odds, you know? I mean, nobody wants to be beaten up all the time. Just be mindful about how critical we could be.
What about constructive criticism?
Yeah, that's interesting. Constructive criticism. Yeah, so constructive criticism is still criticism. It's just criticism that it's got better, PR. All criticism is, we're going to assume, is constructive, right? It's for your good. I like the attempt, don't get me wrong. But by the way, there are some people that will hear parv things as negative also. Like, hey, where's dinner? For one person, could be parv. For the other, could be as, you don't love me, you don't care about me, you think I never do anything right, blah, 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 blah. So you have to be mindful of how your spouses hear certain things, particularly, what we call triggers, where they're not responding in real time to what you're saying. They're reacting to an old story, usually from childhood, about, when a similar pattern sort of unfolded. And we're not going to have time to get into triggers, but Lamaisa is, the bottom line is that constructive criticism is still criticism. And I'm not saying for a second there's not a time and a place to be able to help your wife to see something how you're seeing it. But again, if you remember, the best way to criticize is not to criticize, is to allow her to acknowledge when she gets something right, and to let her know that you appreciate it, and show a karsa tov and gratitude for when she gets it right. That will fuel that behavior much more than any critique could possibly do. Okay? So just along the lines of gratitude, by the way, before we get into editing, we don't realize just how thirsty our spouse is for acknowledgement and for one thing about validating somebody when they're complaining about something, but merely just showing appreciation. During COVID, it's interesting. Everyone had minions in strange places. So there was one that someone had in their backyard. So we were davening there, and then it was like a bar mitzvah boy, 13, 14, who was laning, and the Balabayas, the guy's house, he was sort of giving out shakaris for everyone for coming, and said, hey, don't forget, to thank, the boy who laned. And he goes, no, he lanes for us all the time. And I go, so let me get this straight. Living next to me is no picnic, by the way. I said, if he just did it one time, you'd say, hey, thanks very much, appreciate it. The fact he always does it means you ignore him. You know what I'm saying? So with our spouse, we sometimes show more gratitude to the toll booth collector than we do to our own spouse. Hey, thanks so much, stay warm, make a kiddush Hashem, you want to be nice to our spouse. Why did you do that? How come you do that? And we just jump all over them. If you just are mindful of acknowledging when your spouse does something that you appreciate, or didn't do something you didn't want, 1, 2, 3 times a day, it is so very powerful. Let me share with you a story that I tell a lot, because it's a personal story, and about gratitude and my wife. We were driving some time ago on our way to Shabbaton. It was getting very close to Shkia, and we got lost. And we got into a discussion on directions. My wife turned to me and she said, you know what, David, I just want to thank you. I said, for what, Ashes Chayil? And she said, for all the opportunities that you give me. I said, like what? She said, like the opportunities that you give me to work on my midos. Now, wait a minute. Candid chat, Rabbi? It is so valuable when you acknowledge something that your spouse has done with words, with affirmations. There is a book that came out a number of years ago. Maybe you've seen it. It's a business book called The 1 Minute Manager. It's a tiny little book, sold for $21.95, sold millions of copies more than mine. I'm not bitter, very bitter. It was talking about customer loyalty. How to get customers loyal to you. And this book boiled down to one sentence. Catch your employees doing something right and pat them on the back. That's it. Everybody wants acknowledgement. Now, the rest of the world can acknowledge us, but from our spouse, they're our other half. We are so thirsty for it, so desperate for it. We so desire it. Why starve your spouse? People can be so stingy with acknowledgement to our own spouse. Just imagine the quality of relationship you would have if 3 times a day your spouse texted you or called you or left a note about something you did. Hey, I just loved how you handle the kids in the morning. Or by the way, thanks for not bringing up such and such. Or I so appreciate blah, blah, blah. It's magical.
Now, I can answer your question, I'm sorry, since you mentioned that.
Fire away.
Because it affected me as well, I'm sure it affected me too. There's a saying from a reputable person. He says something very interesting, which I don't know if you agree with as well, with all your knowledge about this topic. He said that a woman controls a man's behavior, a man controls a woman's intelligence. So I don't like behavior, and a man in regards to intelligence as the leader in what path the family's, so to speak, kind of taking. And the way he does things in regards to whether it's spiritually, business-wise, or whatever it is, she adapts towards that. And a woman, a man would adapt to a woman's kind of behavior or something like that. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that statement.
It's interesting. I'd want to give it advanced thought, and I guess there are a lot of ways to interpret that. And there are a lot of metaphors or allegories that people use in terms of the man is like the sun and his wife is like the moon in terms of reflecting back. But that's an interesting idea. To give you a responsible answer, I'd want to give it more thought.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, fine. So again, we just started with the thread of editing ourselves, and we just jumped into gratitude. And you know, in terms of, you know, my wife sent me out shopping, often, but I go, and I went not too long ago, and there's like 12 things on the list. I came back with 8, and 4 were wrong. But, you know, I go to the island in the kitchen, and I put my stuff there, and I'm standing there waiting for my good job. And, you know, my wife picks up the tomato sauce, and she goes, "Oh, you got this tomato sauce." Now, being a keen observer of human nature, having written 14 books on the subject, I knew there was a problem with the emphasis on the word "this." And I said, "Yeah." I go, "Is it a problem?" She goes, No, it's fine. We'll go to the cleaning lady." I can well assure you, I have it on a good authority. There are plenty of things I do that my wife scratches her head at and goes, "I don't know what he's thinking." And I always appreciate when she doesn't necessarily say, "Hey, what are you thinking?" Because I don't know what I'm thinking sometimes. But it is such a different atmosphere in the house. Just being cognizant of how critical we can be transformative in and of itself. Okay, and just at the same time about being critical, the flip side, of course, is to be more aware of just what a relationship would look like if we just were more validating, acknowledging of when our spouse does things that we do appreciate. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts? All right, moving along. Okay. What are the 2 most important words in any marriage?
I'm sorry.
Cleaning lady. No.
I'm sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah, a lot of important 2 words.
I hear you.
I hear you?
Yes, I hear you. I understand.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting, by the way? Just think for a second about this. You all shouted out some very interesting ideas, right? I hear you. I appreciate it. I guess we'll make 2 words. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you. What else?
Yes, dear.
Yes, dear. Right, there's 8 words. Just imagine for a second. If those words just flew out of your mouth and your spouse, 2 words, at the right time, what a different marriage you would have.
You're right.
Thank you. It's a contraction, but we'll accept it. I mean, isn't it just astonishing? It's not War and Peace. It is 2 words. You do something, you're right. I'm sorry, I'll tell you a great phrase, by the way, when you get into a disagreement or something didn't go well. Rather than just dig your heels in deeper, a great phrase is, "You're right, I could have handled that better." That's it. It is so smart, so savvy. You're not. It's not a huge defense. You're not coming in with trying to plead your case to the court. Just why go into spin control? You're right. I could have handled that better. Your spouse 99% of the time will say, "Gee, thank you just for acknowledging it." Understand, please. All we want is to be heard, to be understood, respected, validated. Keep it from your spouse and you'll have so much friction. Give it to your spouse, everything will be so much smoother. When you mess up, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
So if you say that,
Yes.
but they still continue doing, you just said it.
Can you give me, you don't have to if you don't want to, I want to make this practical. Give me a real life example. And you don't have to, it can be, from somebody else's life. I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not comfortable.
If a spouse is asked to do something,
A hypothetical spouse. You look so nervous, sir.
and they say, yes, he or she will do it, but they didn't do it.
Okay.
And then that spouse says, you didn't do it.
Yeah.
He or she says, you're right. And then they keep
Doing it.
doing that.
Right. Okay. So I'm sorry. Let me get this clear. This hypothetical person is married to someone who they asked them to do something. They say they'll do it, and they don't do it. Kind of monster is that? Okay, I got it. So understand that's not a communication problem. That is very often. It's a great example. Thank you, by the way. And let me just share with you the flow chart of how this works. Okay. Here's what I would do if we were sitting in my office, not in front of the world. Okay? I would ask you, I would say, when you ask him again to do it, does he ever do it? Or is this going to be dead on arrival anyway? And then the person would say back, does he ever do it? Or you keep on butchering and it still doesn't get done?
Most of the time, not done.
Not done. So here's the flow chart of possibilities, okay? You ask your spouse to do something, they don't do it, you get upset, they still don't do it. You don't ask your spouse to do it, they don't do it, you're not upset, he's not bothered. Now, what, oh no. You just said it has to be done, but maybe yes, maybe no. But let me ask you this question. If it's not going to get done by him, why would you injure the relationship in the process of him not doing something? Because our ego gets in the way, and you, politely but respectfully, I would say, you are a human being. And if you think your husband should do something, you tell him to do it. If he doesn't do it, you tell him again and again. And the fact he's not doing it is irrelevant, because in your mind he should do it, so you keep on telling him to do it. And it's almost irrelevant whether it gets done or not, because in your mind, this is something he should do. Can you just see, and this is not, this is everybody. Everyone has these same conversations with their spouse. My spouse, I have an expectation my spouse should be doing X, Y, Z. They're not going to do it. I can beat them up, I can cost the relationship, it would pay a price, and maybe get it done, or I can ask myself the following question. I would ask this person is, why is it that you think he or she should be doing this? And what would the response be? Why?
Because I said so.
Because you said so? Yeah. Why?
Maybe it's just the man's responsibility.
It's a man's responsibility. If it's, okay. Or the woman's, yeah.
Let's say if the man doesn't do it and the woman has to pick up and do it for them, then that kind of...
Socks?
that becomes,
The socks on the floor.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. Right.
accept it and lower your expectations and don't bring it up. That's kind of what you're
Right. So here's the thing. Let me just say like this.
Take it as extra mitzvah to do that.
I wouldn't go with that sales pitch, sir, as an extra mitzvah. No. I'm sorry. You now have counsel. Let me represent you on this one, okay? Trust me on this one. Brother, Rev Dessler said once at Shavuot Brachas, love, when expectations begin, love departs. That doesn't mean that you can't have wants, desires. But the minute you have expectations, my spouse should do X, Y, Z, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because your expectation is built as a function of the ego, the Yetzer Hara, that says the world should unfold according to my entitlement and expectations. In other words, yes, we do have traditional roles, no doubt. But you have to ask yourself what are you willing to pay in terms of a price to your marriage and relationship by holding on to this idea that your spouse has to do something because you believe that's its responsibility. Again, whether it is or isn't, it's irrelevant. Research shows that in every successful marriage, there are going to be 5 to 7 things that our spouse does or doesn't do that we absolutely have a hard time with, and they're not changing. So you could consider putting it in that list along with her socks or his socks for these guys. But the idea that he should do something, again, may or may not, go ahead, please.
I don't mean to interrupt.
No, I want you to interrupt. Go ahead.
That example that I gave you is he or she
Yes.
they promise to do that whatever chore or responsibility. Is it still an expectation?
Excellent. The very good question is, he or she promised to do something, and is it still an expectation? So, yes, I'm sorry, let's clarify this. If you simply have an expectation your spouse is going to do something and they don't do it, obviously you're setting yourself up for friction. If your spouse says they're going to do something, here's the rule, by the way. You have to be able to respect your spouse. That means you have to act with integrity and authenticity and honesty. If you say something, and by the way, once again, in bechinuch, this is let your children see what it's modeled, what integrity looks like being modeled in real life. It doesn't mean if it's hard you don't do it, or you forget you don't do it. It means if you say it, it gets done. So 100%, if you give your word to your spouse, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, then they have every right, absolutely. That's no longer a matter of expectation. It's a contract that he will do something, assuming he wasn't, guilted, badgered, or whatever into it, of his own free will. He said, I will do X, Y, Z. Yeah? Then, by all means, yes, you can hold them accountable to that, and we should hold our spouse accountable to that, again, unless there's, obviously unforeseen circumstances. We have to be able to trust our spouse, same way you want your kids to trust you and vice versa. So yes, acting with integrity is important. I'm talking about having an idea that our spouse, or anyone, even our children, by the way, if you dial down expectations to 0, right? See, the disappointment lives from what we expect to where reality unfolds. It doesn't mean for a second, again, we shouldn't have wants and desires and hopes and dreams. Good. The minute you attach an expectation, this should be this way, you're already setting yourself up for friction if it doesn't unfold according to your expectations. Yes, please.
So question. Let's take it the next step. What if it's something important for the other individual?
Say it again, please. I'm sorry?
What if something is important for the other individual, for the spouse, he or she, to do it? Like, for example, if an individual has not only expectation, but certain things are important for him to be done. How do we...
Excellent. So the very good...
Lower my expectation, like she said.
Got it. So you lower your expectations. You don't want resentment to build. You say, fine, I expect nothing from my spouse. They do nothing. Good marriage? Not so much. Right? So if you're something you want your spouse to do, the protocol is to have an open, honest discussion. Because once again, if your spouse is not doing something that they can do and they're choosing not to, again, it's important to tease out capability for motivation. Even though it may be simple for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some sort of emotional block, something going on. Just parenthetically, I'm going to come back to this. I had a guy in my office, brilliant guy, sweet guy, who was having a hard time with one of his kids because he wasn't wearing a yarmulke. And he kept on saying, how hard is it for him just simply put a yarmulke on his head? And I said to him, I'm going to be blunt with you. Is that what I say that I ask permission sometimes? This was a big guy. And I said to him, you're saying how hard is it for your son to put the yarmulke on his head? How hard is it for you to put the fork down? Wow. I said, just put the fork down. What's the issue? By the way, to his credit, he got it. Because it's not about the fork, it's not about the yarmulke. What does it mean? What's the emotion that goes into it? So just because, this kid could have put the yarmulke on his head, It has nothing to do with he kept on going. He goes, you do this, you do this. He goes, I had enough of that. I go, it's not just this. What does this represent? What does it mean? So again, just because it's something that may come easy to us, it's not a big deal, doesn't mean it doesn't come with a lot of emotional stuff. But that aside, assuming it's something your wife can do, you're choosing not to, it's not about that, it's about the relationship. Understand this. What would be the only reason you wouldn't give to someone you love? What would be the only reason you wouldn't give to someone you love?
Can't.
Well, right, you can't. And if you're choosing not to, why? Sorry?
Resentment?
Yeah, it could very well be resentment. It could very well be your own frustration. It could very well be when you bring up your stuff, there's no mechanism because he always shuts you down. So this is your passive-aggressive way. I wrote, as the Rev mentioned, a couple of books. One is called Never Get Angry Again. But I'm going to save you $12.95 right now. Daniel read it. Good book? Okay, you got it. Great. Don't lend it. Let them buy their own copy. No, I'm kidding. My kids always say, they go, how come you never take us to the library? I go, let mommy take you. Daddy has an issue with libraries. But, right. Whatever the reason is, so let's say, your spouse doesn't feel like they have an opportunity to express, whatever it is, have an open, honest conversation about it. Not when your spouse isn't doing what you want. Not when you're in the heat of the moment. You go, quiet, nice, relaxed, geschmack, conversation, start. Again, the same way we said here. I appreciate you this, this, and this, and this. I know I always ask you to, whatever it is. And then collaborate. What is it I can do maybe to make it easier for you? Can I ask honestly? Have an open, honest conversation with your spouse. This is something, is it difficult because it brings up memories of X, Y, Z, or you're having a hard time because there's just a time crunch, or you can't think, or maybe when you do it, I get upset because you don't do it right. Whatever it is, you may be very surprised when you have an open, honest conversation with your spouse, what comes back. But consider the possibility of what the marriage could look like if you had an open, honest conversation about these things. So, whatever it is, to answer your very good question, sir, is you can have a conversation with your spouse and even let them know. Whatever the reason is, you're Moscow, you accept it, you love her, she does it or doesn't do it, it doesn't make a difference in terms of your love for her. This is something you'd appreciate. And then ask her, let's work together. Is there a reason that you can articulate that you're not doing it? Maybe she just go, I don't know. She may not know. But you can lovingly, calmly, respectfully have a conversation and let her know, and this is the key, by the way, how important it is to you. Sometimes we think our spouse wants to do X, Y, Z, but they've got a list that keeps on going of all the things that are important to them. But if they may be surprised to learn, by the way, on a scale from 1 to 10, for you this is a 10. It's a 9. Maybe like, oh my gosh, I never knew. I just thought this was something. I was like, yeah, I could do what. Maybe they had no idea. The fact that you gave them a hard time about it doesn't in their mind magnify it, because you may give them a hard time about a lot of things. So if you're able to say, again, following the protocol in the beginning, calmly, quietly, make it about yourself. I know it's not the end of the world. You're amazing. You do this, this, and this. I'm just, is there a reason that you might be able to articulate, or can we talk together about how we could accomplish this? And you might be very, very surprised what they say if when they say it, they know it's going to be met with what? Empathy and validation. Yeah? So your spouse is going to say, well, you know what? I always told you to do this, and you never did that for me. And your response is not going to get defensive. That was the wrong response. But yeah, she could have brought it up differently. But your response, rather than shut them down and say, oh, very nice, blah, blah, blah. No. My gosh, I'm sorry. I had no idea that was causing you so much pain. And now you make a choice. You either acknowledge it, do tshuva, and say, regardless of whether or not you do this for me, I want you to know, I didn't realize I dropped the ball on this. I'm so sorry. And then you correct the behavior. You have a different relationship. Okay, good question. Okay, any other, I think we need to wrap up. Any other last comments, thoughts, questions? Yes, please, Robertson.
What if either spouse says they're going to work on something, but they don't end up doing it and there's just no results from it? And it's been like a long period of time.
Right, your spouse is going to work on something, right? I think in every marriage there's something we want our spouse to work on.
They say they acknowledge it, they say they're going to work on it, but then they just, you keep going back around in the same circle.
Right, so it would be irresponsible to give sort of blanket advice. I mean, I will anyway, don't get me wrong. It's just, it's not ideal without knowing the specifics, because I'm just going to say in broad categories. There are a lot of things that we want to work on that come with emotional weight. Our stuff, and we all have our stuff, yeah? So, working on that stuff, for most people, not some, most people, is very painful, because it requires self-awareness. It requires looking in the mirror. It requires changing a lot of stuff. It requires sometimes, maybe even, depending on the situation, working with somebody. It could be a trauma. It could be a lot of stuff. And revisiting that is very painful. So a thought, when your spouse says they're going to work on it and don't, it's easy to get frustrated, but it's understandable on both sides, because they're doing something you don't necessarily appreciate, and I'm going to work on it is a very good way to sort of create a little bit of a buffer until, you realize that the pain of working on it is something you made more than you bargained for. So again, without knowing the specifics, what I would encourage people to do in this case is, to whatever this thing is, sort of circle it, be clear about it. And then the spouse who wants the person to work on it is going to say as follows: is there anything I can do that can make it easier for you to X, Y, Z? Do you want me to make some calls? Do you want me to, whatever it is, you might be surprised by saying, yeah, here's what I need. Now, you would think, my spouse says they're going to work on it, I'm going to go hands off. That's not what they need. They may need your validation. They may need a cheerleader. Whatever it is they need, you want to come to the table. You're in this together. You're part of the same neshama. So, what is it I could do to make this easier for you? Oftentimes, if they're trying to work on something, obviously bringing in maybe a therapist or a counselor or somebody that can help guide them, yeah, it could be very effective. Maybe make some calls, go with them, whatever it is. But if, simply telling your spouse to work on it and they say, okay, if you're talking about something that go with deep roots, that's rarely enough. You really need to be able to be there in, in the arena with your spouse and helping them with it, yeah, okay? Even if it's something they're doing almost to you, yeah, not to say that you're the cause of it, chas v'shalom, but you're doing it and you're almost the victim of it, there's still what to be said for your being able to help him to work on himself in order, and again, this is true for every living human being. We all have stuff to work on. Okay, so again, I would, without knowing what the specific thing is, I would ask him and work with him on whatever it is to be his partner in that success. And certainly celebrate the milestones, and when he does get it right and he does make incremental progress, as genuine celebrations is what they are, breaking free from somebody's stuff rather than, focusing on the one time or even 10 times that he drops the ball. There are plenty of things we can do in terms of helping to move our spouse in a more positive direction. Okay? Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay.
Question about expectation from the kids?
Yeah, expectation. Yeah. So again, you can. This comes into play when you've got a child who may have like a learning disability, or a behavioral issue, or no perceived issue. And parents always say, "How come I can't expect this or that from my kids?" Again, it's not about wanting your kids to do certain things. The expectation, by definition, comes from the ego. The ego says the world should unfold according to my entitlement and expectations, meaning this is how it should be. As soon as you say that, you're setting yourself up for failure. I want my child to do well on his test. I want my child to be well behaved. As soon as you say, I expect him to be well behaved to yourself, and that's the expectation, it completely shifts the dynamics. Meaning then, where is the room for them to fall short? And when they do fall short, and they will because they're kids, they're human beings, your response is going to be much different than if you're able to take it out of the realm of an expectation. Okay?
They need to fall short.
They need to fall short, yes, absolutely. Right, they need to fall short, and they will fall short. How they grow is how, and build resilience, is how you respond to them falling short rather than react with your own stuff. 100%. Okay, let me just share with you just a couple of important things. When couples go through a stressor, and again, most every couple will, deal with certain things, whether health or financial, whatever the crisis, whatever's going on, it's important to do as follows. It's very easy to make all the conversations centered around this thing, this matzav, pass the salt, what are we going to do with blah, 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 this and that. It's so easy and what happens is, when you're dealing with one stressor, all the conversations get monopolized, the energy gets sucked out, and it all becomes negative. Rather, what you're going to do is you can create a place and a space in your home where you're going to talk about the thing that should not be mentioned, yeah? And whatever that is, it could be at night, 9, 10, over coffee, tea, whatever it is, or it can be in the study, or it can be here. It's not going to drip its way unless it's, b'koach nefesh, and you have to talk about it right then and there. Table it. You're going to find that the rest of the relationship is so much healthier because you take any relationship and focus just on the negative parts or one negative thing, it's going to be much more difficult to sustain, obviously, positivity. So there's so much good in our lives, in our relationships, and whenever you're dealing with these pocket stressors, be mindful that by not letting them drip into every conversation and every interaction, you're just going to be able to enjoy a much higher quality relationship and interaction and be much more positive. There's some other neat studies and things to do in terms of just for building connection and intimacy. Obviously, not much that we can go into here, but I can say that a couple of things the research shows is very important, and with this. One is just eye contact. Certainly when your spouse is talking about something that's important to them, but when you're in a conversation with your spouse, eye contact is particularly in the age of social media and phones, it's very easy to listen with half an ear. Both people are talking on their phones. I can't tell you how powerful it is to actually look your spouse in the eye when you're having a conversation. It is very valuable. Also, just having fun together, doing, the stuff that you did when you were dating or in the first year of marriage, whatever it is. It's very easy to fall into routines. So I thoroughly encourage, a date night. It's so intuitive and so obvious. And every time you go out on the date, we should do this every week. And then 5 months go before I was like, hey, remember we should. But if you really make it a set date, a set thing, you can both look forward to it, and you build everything around it. Unless it's something that comes up that you absolutely can't, then keep that date as important as it should be. Okay, there's I guess other stuff, maybe not for this format. Okay, any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, 2 quick questions. Go ahead, please. Yes and yes.
What do you want to say about intimacy?
I thought better of it and decided not to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
You mentioned bringing a third party in, Rabbi.
Yeah, having nothing to do with that. Yeah. Hey, what happened to Lieberman? How come he's not on Tony time anymore? You don't want to know.
Psychologist, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's obviously you're one, so you're in this world. What's your take on it generally? As a newlywed couple, do you suggest they always have a third party to go to?
No. Therapists can make things worse too easily. No, if you're having a hard time communicating something to your spouse, because I understand, bringing a third party can be very good, to be able to maybe learn some skills and some tools and techniques, how to communicate, like this. You could, read a book, watch a couple of talks on it. But if it's still something that's difficult for you, because understand, we grew up in a house, some people grew up in a house, for example, where being vulnerable was very scary. And expressing yourself, there's a saying that a child who can't express themselves to their mother won't be able to express themselves to another. So you grow up in a house, and how you feel, what you think was shut down. It's like, how many times, with our own kids, I certainly grew up with this. I'm hungry. You can't be hungry. You just ate. Really? It's like, would you like to take a ride with your, a trip with your spouse, and you're like, I need the bathroom, and they're like, no. You're fine for another hour. Meanwhile, you're looking at your big gulp, and you're like, ah! Yeah? In other words, some people grow up, and it's very, very hard to express ourselves because we're not blaming parents. Parents have their own stuff and so on. But if you grew up in a house where you were shut down, you weren't entitled to your thoughts, to your feelings, it's very difficult now to express yourself to your spouse. And so, so in something like that can require learning those skills. But what's so valuable, and I'm so glad you asked the question, is less to bring in a third party and more for the spouse to learn exactly what they need to do in order for you to be able to express yourself and not feel like if you get this, that you go running back like a turtle into the shell and not come out for 20 years. So, being able to, when your spouse comes to you, particularly if they have a hard time expressing themselves, to empathize and validate their experience, even if you think they're crazy. They're going to keep on expressing themselves again and again and again and again. The reason why we don't express ourselves is because when we grew up, we learned it wasn't meant with anything productive. So we stopped. Or worse, we were blamed for our feelings. Yeah? So again, you can bring in a third party to you blue in the face and you can learn tactics on what to do. But it's our ability to be able to overcome that ourselves. And for our spouse, depending on who we're married to be able to hear us in a way that allows for us to continue to express ourselves, and that's your empathy and validation. It's a very good question. Okay. And we'll end with, well, a lot to talk about, but any other final questions? I want to make sure that if you have something that's pressing in your mind. No? Okay, fine. So let's just end with this. Every marriage has issues. I mean, every disagreements. The couples come to me. They say, we never argue. I never argue. I don't know what that marriage is going to look like when they get into an argument. Yeah, disagreements aren't the problem. You can disagree a dozen times a day or disagree once every 5 months. But you'd rather be in the marriage that when you disagree, you're able to express yourself, the other person empathizes, validates, you have a respectful, productive conversation versus being minimized, blamed, justifying their behavior, people going other ways and feeling disconnected. End of the day, yes, the questions were so fabulous and so important. Of course we have our wants, we have our desires, there are things that we'd like our spouse to do. But what really bothers us, what really gets to us, is not that they're not doing X, Y, Z, it's that we think that they don't care enough, they don't respect us, they don't love us and respect us. So when your spouse comes to you, if there's one powerful takeaway here, rather than just dismiss it or get defensive because they may be putting you in pain because they're in pain, take a beat, stop for a moment. Or as Daniil, had mentioned in terms of, when you can't engage, have that mechanism to sort of disengage respectfully and then come back and revisit it. But if you're able to empathize with your spouse, validate their experience, and take them out of pain, you'll find you can have a near magical marriage. So with that, I thank you so much for listening. Wishing you a beautiful Shalom Bayit. Thank you.